Hello and welcome to the Max MPS Radio. My name is Jan Friss as always, and today I'm honored to have Brandon Kempter on. We just solved some audio problems, so I'm glad we're finally recording. And I'm super happy to have Brandon on. We will talk about contest prep, all things related. And I'm excited to pick your brain. So happy to have you on, and welcome, Brandon.
Well, thank you very much for having me. That is super appreciated. I'm always keen to share some knowledge and perspective, and I know you've got some great questions to work with today. And for those that don't know, as mentioned, my name is Brandon Kempter, and essentially I am a pro natural bodybuilder, and alongside that, I specialise in preparing natural physique athletes for the stage. I'm based in Australia, and I work predominantly on the online space.
Pretty cool. So you basically did your introduction. We just talked off air a little bit about your past. So if you just quickly want to run through that, I think it's just for people, especially like people in the German-speaking realm. Probably a lot of people don't know you. So it's maybe super interesting to hear about your past and your history as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like most, before I was coach, I was athlete, and I started competing in my late teens. I was 19 the first time I got on stage, and I competed through teens, juniors, into opens, and over the past couple of times I competed into the pro league. So it's sort of a ground up approach, so to speak. And obviously within that journey, my passion grew for nutrition and exercise science, and I started working as a personal trainer basically the year I started competing, and a couple of years later I was studying exercise science, and I really my passion for what we do as competitors really grew, and over time I transitioned to working exclusively with physique athletes. It was around 2014 where I really transitioned into that realm, and since then I've been working essentially only with physique-orientated athletes, whether it be men's fitness, physique, bodybuilding, figure, etc.
Pretty cool. When did you turn pro?
I turned pro in 2016. That was, we're coming up to 5 years now. We're in 2021, and that was my ultimate dream. So it was awesome to achieve that at such a young age.
You were 24, right? Which of those preps was it? Was it the first men's open, or was it because you said you competed in teens and in juniors and then transitioned into opens?
Yes. So I'll tell you what. Each year that I competed, I always competed in
each
opens.
Year.
I don't know. So I did 2 years back to back, and then I had a couple of year gap for when I turned pro. But each of the times that I competed, I did compete in the opens as well, just to measure up. But that 2016 preparation was the first time that I wasn't bound to an age group category. I was no longer a teen. I was no longer a junior. It was just, okay, cool. We have opens height classes and weight classes. So that was essentially the first time where I had no choice but to step up with the big boys. So like I said, it was an absolute honor to be awarded that. That was with IMBA at the time as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my follow-up question. So just for kicking off this podcast, actually. So what are your current plans for your own athletic endeavor, and also your team of athletes for 2021?
That's a great question. Look, for me personally, as an athlete, this will likely be one of my longest off seasons to date, and that's not specifically because I feel as though I need, an excessive amount of time to really focus on improvement. Yes, we all need to improve, certainly, but I'd be very happy with running a 2-year gap between shows. But I would probably be competing more than likely in 2023. My reason for that is because I really want to focus on my athletes, and I am also continuing my study as well. I'm doing my master's at the moment, and the last time that I competed, I was full-time coaching, part-time studying, and it was definitely I would say, more challenging than it needs to be. So I want to make sure that I'm setting myself up for an environment that's conducive to the best result. So that'll likely be 2023. With my athletes, these I absolutely love the people I work with. It's an absolute pleasure, and I'll be focusing on them 110% over the next few years. And look, the goal in our team is really simple. We want to make sure that we're producing the highest quality athlete possible. And my big piece here is, no matter who I work with, I want to make sure that they're bringing their 110% best to the stage. If I have an athlete come to me and we have their canvas, their physique, and they step on stage and we know that they're 100% at their best, then essentially that's mission accomplished. Regardless of the stage placing.
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately what it's all about. Maybe besides the process, but I think we will talk about that later as well. So when was the last year you were actually competing?
That was 2019.
Okay.
So it was relatively recently. And that was my biggest season to date. That was, off the top of my head, that was 7 shows in 8 weeks. So we just went basically back to back.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
It was a monster season. But personally, I love back-to-back shows. I can just roll off, one show to the next, and I feel great. So we did 7 shows. That was in Australia and in the US. So there was 4 shows, I believe, in Australia. And then I went to the US and we did LA. We did the INBA Universe there. Then I went up to New York, did WNBF Worlds. And then I went to Portland, out of all places, and did an OCB show. I suppose I was quite naive to what the US had to offer in that I just basically looked at 3 shows and went, cool, I know I want to do Universe, I know I want to do WNBF, and let's see what other show we can do. And I found the show in Portland. I had no idea where Portland was, what it was about. But the last show turned out to be a very, very small show.
Could imagine.
Yeah, so the last show wasn't the greatest, but the first 2 shows were pretty awesome. So yeah.
So that was your pro debut, right?
That was my pro. I did do it. No, actually, I lied. I did a pro show in 2016. So that was my second
cool.
time competing as a pro. So I did pro for ICN, and obviously you're only a pro to the federation you're bound with. And I won my pro card in another federation, and then I did WNBF as an amateur.
How did you place at Worlds?
At Worlds,
yeah,
I got a second place at Worlds.
I was at Worlds as well. I was
Yep.
at Worlds in 2019. I'm just thinking, because I was doing four shows back to back in 2019 as well, and I thought as a first timer, like retrospectively, it was probably a little bit too much, like just back to back, because I was fading. Like the third show was good, fourth show was and then I did WNBF Worlds even 3 weeks after. And at WNBF Worlds, but that was definitely my worst look. So how did you actually end up conserving that look, just out of interest? Because just
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a balance, and I always say that coaching is both an art and a science. And the science is the simplistic part, knowing what variables to change and what influence it should have on your physiology. The art is obviously knowing what variables to change at the right times and to what magnitudes. And in contest preparation, it is really a balance point from start to finish. But I think the first portion of contest preparation is pretty simplistic. The end is really where you need to give a little and take a little. Got to know when to push, got to know when to pull back. And it is definitely a challenging point to manage, especially if someone's coaching themselves. Luckily, I had a really good friend of mine who was essentially my eyes and could give me an objective viewpoint. And at the end of my contest preparation, I had essentially increased my caloric intake pretty close to maintenance. So the most aggressive portion of my contest preparation was complete by around 5-ish weeks out. And then I increased my calories somewhere around 700 calories above baseline. And then we maintained that throughout the season. So basically from first show first show to second show, I still lost a little bit of total body mass, and then from second show till the 7th show, I basically maintained throughout that. And I think I was able to maintain fairly well. I think I looked 100% throughout, which is definitely the best I've ever managed that in my career. And obviously, you learn a lot about yourself in many ways in contest preparation. But I think first time competitor, first time is hard, man. I remember, in 2013, etc., you would do one show, maybe 2 shows, and then you're like, I'm done. And I remember doing one season, I did 3 shows, I was wrecked. I was just like, I'm done. So I think you, over time, get better at managing the dieting condition, because there's no way I could have done 4 shows, let alone 7 shows the first time, pardon me, that I got on stage.
Yeah, so you think that just like maintaining that look probably also is something that you just get when you are more experienced?
I think that the more experienced you are, the better you are at managing yourself mentally so that you can persevere through diet-related fatigue. And I think that you get better at reading your body. And definitely, if you have a good coach in your corner, it makes a huge difference as well, because they'll be able to, that's the art of coaching as well, being able to read the body and go, okay, look, this is happening, therefore we need to change X, Y, Z variables at these magnitudes. Okay, cool. This is working, etc.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You should have done the Yorton Cup with the OCB.
I tell you what,
it was amazing. It was definitely amazing. It was my 4th show, and it was a hell of a show. Like super high niveau.
It is on the bucket list. I'll tell you what, I really wanted to do the WNBF Worlds. That's been on my bucket list for a long time. And the Yorton Cup. Yorton Cup, though, was really, from memory, it was very early in the season. And it just didn't work out for me to compete at the highest level here in Australia at Worlds and then dash over to the US. It just didn't line up. But next time, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was 3 weeks before WNBF Worlds in 2019.
Because literally the way it worked out is I finished it at the ICN Worlds here in Australia, and then that finished on a Sunday. I jumped on the flight on Monday, got to the US on whatever, Tuesday or Wednesday, had a couple of days, and then it was just straight on stage again for the universe. Yeah.
Pretty cool. Pretty drastic. I mean, I can totally relate. I was literally from one show at the weekend, just jumping into the plane to Washington DC, and doing
it's just
yeah.
It's the best thrill though, right? You just finish a show, you're buzzing, getting on a plane. As bodybuilders, bodybuilding can be a bit of a lonely sport, but obviously we have a community, that's great. But it's definitely a sport that is not really respected outside of our circle. To you and I, bodybuilding is really important to us. For everyone else, it's like, whatever. And then, of course, the natural bodybuilders, they're like, who are these little guys? So, when we travel, like, I love that. I feel like a real athlete. It's a really awesome experience, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was at the States in 2019 2 times with like 3-week difference, so that was pretty cool as well.
Oh, wow.
And obviously that 2-week or nearly 2-week holiday afterwards, after like my 10-month prep or whatever, was definitely pretty cool as well. It was super fun times.
It would have been very fun. It's definitely a challenging time, challenging place to nail your recovery diet. I was in the US for only 24 hours after. We finished the show and then went home. And I said to my fiance, I said, this is probably a good thing, because there's just so much food around this place. It's crazy.
I handled it okay, to be honest. Yeah, it was okay. Awesome. So basically, my next question would be, how did the 2020 season go in Australia, over in Australia, and how did the pandemic situation affect the competitions over there?
Yeah, look, I don't think it matters where you are or what you do. Everyone was affected in some way.
Obviously.
Similar to you guys, we did have a period of lockdown, but I think thus far, Australia has done relatively well in that it is just a big island, basically right down on the arse of the world. So it kind of worked in our favour. In terms of the bodybuilding season, like pretty much everywhere else, the first season for the year, which for us is it's basically it's around April, May, June. That was cancelled. Pardon me, but the end of the year, that did go ahead. We had a variety of shows in our states. They were a little bit smaller than usual, the shows, but the quality was really good. We had some great athletes get on stage, and just the quality overall, I was very impressed that the guys that held in there, probably similar to in Europe, a lot of people trained at home with whatever equipment they had. And in Australia, the gyms opened up 3 weeks before the first lot of shows, and people got on stage with amazing physiques. It really blows my mind the dedication that these individuals presented, because contest preparation is hard enough as it is, but to go through a contest preparation with the uncertainty of not knowing whether this show is going to go ahead or not, because things can be cancelled like this, and training at home, it really blew my mind. And I think if you can prep through a pandemic like that, I mean, you can prep through anything. Like, absolutely. So we did have some shows, but obviously we don't have any. We can't travel probably like yourself. So that's it means that particularly for the pros, there really wasn't much available. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that off air a little bit. And it's super cool to hear that over in Australia you basically had at least a second season.
Yeah.
I mean, we had basically the UK DFBA. I think you're familiar with that.
Yes.
That show, the big UK DFBA, which was great, and we had some great showings there. And also the BNBF they actually went into lockdown in the UK 3 days or something like that before the BNBF finals, and they basically just shifted it back 1 month, and it worked out. They did the show 1 month later, and it was a good show as well. So pretty cool. At least 2 big shows in the UK happened. I think there was a show in Italy, probably quite some shows. I'm not sure about more, but we don't had any shows in Germany at all. Last year, which was definitely not cool, but I'm hoping for the best this year.
But my everything is crossed that there's some more shows internationally, and I really hope that the next few years brings some positivity, because actually it's on my bucket list to go to Europe and compete. That's in 2023. That's my plan. Is I really want to go to Europe and compete, and get amongst the community over there.
I mean, probably highest level in Europe is probably the UK DFBA, and also Germany. I have to say that Germany is pretty damn crazy.
Yeah.
So if you compete in the fall season, we actually, I think at the biggest show in Germany, we only have 1 international men's open class, but it's always stacked. And I mean, you would probably do some great damage there. It's a crazy show. It's probably at WNBF Worlds level in terms of athlete size, and just people coming there and supporting the athletes.
Yeah,
it's great because we only have finals. We don't have qualifiers. So basically everybody can compete, and it's just one big hell of a show.
That's awesome. I think that one thing always fascinates me is that the bodybuilding culture in different countries, and obviously even different sectors within different countries. But one thing that was really amazing about WNBF Worlds is just the volume of countries that came together. I mean, you were there. You're walking around and you have 40 different countries surrounding you, and it's really amazing like that. And I think that UK really bring it. They bring some great physiques. Germany as well. Yeah, it really is. Hey, and it's really got that underground culture, which I think is really awesome. So yes, it's definitely on the bucket list, man.
Yeah, no, I think we have I know we have an international competition in Germany in the not the fall but the spring season.
Awesome.
So in the first season. Cool. Yeah, I mean, super glad for you guys over there. And yeah, just as you said, crossing your fingers.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about you pushing your athletes to their absolute best, and I think that's a great leading in for the next question, which is basically what mental attributes do you want an athlete to have in check if they're coming to you to be quote unquote the best that they can?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a great question. I think that, you know, if I was to explain the general clientele that I'll work with, most of the individuals I'm going to work with are going to be bodybuilding, majority portion, / into sort of men's physique / figure for the females. And most of them have competed a couple of times beforehand. Occasionally I have the opportunity to work with a first timer, and I always love doing that. I think it's a really important preparation because it determines whether they stay with the sport or continue. So it's, it's a big responsibility for the coach. But generally speaking, my athletes have competed before. And the sort of traits that I like to, I shouldn't say traits, more habits that I think make a good bodybuilder is having a somewhat robotic mentality. And that may be abnormal for general population, but when it comes to being a good bodybuilder, that's a productive piece. I often say that bodybuilding is the art of doing the same thing over and over again with small tweaks. You know, if variety is a necessity for you, whether it be food or training, I'd say probably going to cut yourself off the knees a little bit. But if you can really enjoy the consistency of, you know, of training at that level consistently, and, you know, you can find enjoyment in, you know, controlling your nutrition variables as you need to, then I think you'll do really well in the sport. So the things that I kind of look for are people that really have that drive to really push as far as possible. And those are always easy people to work with because I don't have to push them as hard, because when I tell them where we want to go, they go, yes, I'm on board with that. And people that have a somewhat robotic and routine kind of thought process. I think those are good general traits for creating a high-end athlete.
Cool. So basically what I mean I usually for every question note down a few things on my end as well to actually create a discussion. I think just having bodybuilding as a really high priority is something that literally every high level athlete has. I think there's a certain balance and it is important, but I think at a certain point everything or anything on top probably takes away a little bit from bodybuilding, and it may be totally worth it. That's super. I mean, there are some things that are even more important than bodybuilding, like building a family or whatever, or your job probably. But I think, as you said, having people on board that really have that drive and that really want to also prioritize bodybuilding is something that is really important.
Yeah, I often say that you know, bodybuilding. If you love bodybuilding, bodybuilding is always a part of your life. But in contest preparation, it is a much bigger part of your life. So I think, you know, in the off season, you can definitely manage your physical and mental resources a little bit differently. You can maybe, you know, dabble in maybe another sport. It'll cost you a bit of result, but you can probably do that sort of thing. Or you know, dabble in another hobby a little bit. But in contest preparation needs to be your main thing. For example, you know, bodybuilding has been my number one passion since I started the gym. And I do have other hobbies. Like we love jet skiing, and that's kind of our other thing that we do outside of bodybuilding. But with that said, no matter what happens, bodybuilding is my number one. By the end of a contest preparation, I don't have the recovery capacity to go and beat my body up going jet skiing. That's fine. That goes in the garage. That's done for the next few months. When I bodybuild. And I think that, you know, if you have an athlete that brings that mentality to the table, then that can definitely work. And, you know, you mentioned before about balance. I think that balance is a very... everyone has a different definition of balance. And I think that anyone that wants to be really good, or I should say, wants to be their best at something, anything, their best at business, bodybuilding or any other sport or academia, it requires a bit of a skewed definition of balance. If your definition of balance is, drinking alcohol 3 times a week, you're just not going to be that great of a bodybuilder. For me, my definition of balance is I'm going to train 5 days a week. I'm going to meet my nutrition, and I'm going to love my life. That's my definition of joy and balance. If you look at least at this time in my life, at this current time, myself and my fiance, we don't have children. When that happens, that will change a bit. But really, for us, it is work, education, and training / nutrition, all on an even playing field. Yeah.
Totally agree. With balance, I was meaning more like that you not bashing everything in your life for bodybuilding and just prioritizing that one thing.
Sure.
Because usually when people are really just, I get clients that think about bodybuilding all the time, like 24/7, and they just want to do everything, and you kind of have to even slow them down a little bit because they're doing too much. I think that's even a thing where you have to introduce some balance so they actually do better long term, or actually produce more longevity.
Good point. Mm-hmm.
Also with the hobby thing, I find it kind of interesting because I think there are some hobbies that probably are pretty relaxing, like watching films or movies or whatever.
That's true. Yeah.
That will probably have a great impact on your bodybuilding journey because you're just laying down, relaxing, and recovering from training. And there are things like you do, like jet skiing, which is probably not a good thing to do late in prep.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think they're just things that are maybe neutral or actually contributing to your athlete's success. But then obviously also things that are physically and mentally demanding that maybe take away from bodybuilding, and then you have to decide if it's worth it for you.
That's true. Yeah, look, you got to prioritize, right?
Absolutely. I would be interested in what trends you see in first timers versus more experienced competitors in terms of experiences they see throughout their prep. And you also touched on that you pretty much that you don't work that much with first timers, did I?
Yeah, not as much as I used to, and that's just a product of, I think the audience that I tend to talk to on social media, for example. It's usually people that have competed a couple of times, but I do have the opportunity to work with first timers occasionally, and I definitely really enjoy it. Like I said, it's. We were all a first timer at some stage, and it's just such an important contest preparation. It's where you decide, whether I love this thing or not. So definitely an important piece, and I definitely see different trends in the way that a first timer operates versus a advanced athlete. And a question that I'm often asked is, does it get easier to get lean the more you do it? And the answer to that is, from a purely physiological perspective, no. Your body's not going to be more willing to go into that potentially compromised position of having very low body fat percentage. But I think it does get easier to manage mentally. For example, 2 things that first-time athletes really struggle with is, 1, hunger. Now, we know that hunger is going to be a integral part of contest preparation. We can attenuate it, but we can't circumvent it. And advanced athletes are better at managing that. They register, yes, I'm hungry, and they move on, and they embrace it as part of it and go through that. Beginner athletes tend to tend to sort of focus on it. I'm hungry, oh my god, and they focus on how inescapable it is, and they try and do anything they can to completely alleviate it or circumvent it, which is impossible. And that, I think, makes it a bit more challenging for them to manage from an adherence perspective. And the second thing is, as you likely experience, at the end of your contest preparation, when your inert energy conservation cues are upregulated to an absolute maximum, you feel everything feels a bit harder in life. I remember walking in contest preparation, and I drag my feet and kick things because I'm not lifting my legs as high, my feet as high because my body's trying to conserve energy. Putting weights away in the gym was like, damn, this is hard. going for a walk with my fiance, you know, she would power on ahead. I'm going, you need to slow down. 3 weeks after my contest prep, I'm powering ahead. I'm feeling great. But that decrease in perceived energy, which is, you know, that's part of contest preparation that I think the beginner struggles with. Because the way I look at it is like this. Come and live a day in your shoes in contest prep at the end. That's easy. Contest preparation is a rather abrasive endeavor. You do it for 6 months, 8 months, in your scenario, 10 months, and it wears at you. And that's the thing where having that mental toughness that a good advanced athlete will have makes it a lot, it means that they can manage, you know, the stresses of contest preparation a lot better. And that's not to say that a first-time athlete can't nail it 100% the first time. They certainly can. But that's part of the learning process. Okay, cool. I'm hungry. Now I need to, you know, yes, we're going to attenuate it, but I need to work through this psychologically. You know, training when your body feels heavy, you know, making sure you're meeting your requisite step output when you really don't feel like it. It's that sort of discipline that it takes time to develop, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's also a matter of just building good habits, but those ultimately, obviously, take discipline. I mean,
and the guys, sorry, go.
I mean, I cleaned my kitchen every damn day. But it was just because I was so habitually doing it. At the end of the day, even though I was fucking devastating tired, I was still doing it.
That's part of your training now. See, that's crazy. It's funny that because yes, you have a lot of compensatory behaviors that kick in if you're not aware of it. For example, like I have a little bit of lawn out here, and mowing that lawn is something that in summer I have to do every second week, but in contest preparation I'm sitting here like I don't want to do it. Like I can get someone else to do that. But then at the end of my contest preparation I was like, no, I have to do this. This is part of my exercise, you know, this is part of my exercise activity thermogenesis. I gotta do this thing. So yeah, I definitely feel you on that.
Absolutely. Do you think just because you at the end you said that people can actually nail that 100% in the first time, don't you actually think that people that doing really, really well at the first time still do better next time?
Oh yes, 100%. So what I mean by nail it 100% is, I mean, they're bringing their best at that time.
Okay.
There's no doubt that, you know, the longer you're in this game, you know, it's very likely, to a point, obviously when you get up into maybe your 50s, you start to decline a little bit, that's age related, but up to that point, there's no doubt you'll get better. You have, you know, more lean mass, quite possibly better symmetry, more density, etc. But, you know, nailing it the first time, I mean, just, you know, they're able to take their canvas, their piece of artwork, and, you know, dial it in well the first time. And I think there's definitely some traits here. The guys that I see who nail it the first time usually have a couple things in their corner. They have a background as an athlete through their younger years. Doesn't matter whether it's gymnastics, swimming, whatever, they got a background. In fact, I love working with swimmers because they always say to me, you know, high-end swimmers are doing 6 days in the pool, smallest days 2 hours. So when I tell them, okay, cool, we're going to train, you know, 10 hours a week. Oh, that's easy, man. That's fine. So they usually have a background in sports in some sort because they've built mental toughness through that, even if it's in a different facet. And the other thing is they've lived the bodybuilding lifestyle for a while. You know, let's say the guys that have worked with me for 1 or 2 years before they get on stage the first time, they have watched cohort after cohort of athlete go through it. They've been talking to other guys in our team. They've got their head around, okay, cool. This is where I need to look. Like, this is how I need to look. I can create that vision in my mind. And having had so many conversations with others who have went through it, they have built as much you know, experience through others as they can. And then they're the guys that seem to be able to get into it because they know roughly what they're in for. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, you will probably agree that our job as a coach is to actually manage those, not expectations, but also the things that you can expect throughout the prep that will probably happen to you. Like you said, hunger, probably higher stress levels, lethargy. Yeah, that's basically it. And And I think if you handle those three things better, from prep to prep, you also probably are potentially losing less lean mass.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Because we actually talked about hunger, I think we probably put that hunger question in here. So
Yeah.
could you just explain hunger physiology in the context of contest prep and how to manage it the best way possible, quote unquote?
Yeah, look, I can give you a simplistic overview. Obviously, hunger by feedback signaling is a complex neuroendocrine response, and it is primarily a response that occurs in relation to energy availability, whether it be acute or chronic. So we know that when we're in a gaining phase and we're not, taxing the reward centers in the brain with hyperpalatable food, that we get to a point where hunger sensitivity declines dramatically. We've all experienced it. We're just not hungry. Oh my God, I don't want to look at food in the peak of an off season. And in opposition to that, when energy is scant, as in contest preparation, we obviously have an upregulation in hunger. We have a variety of adaptations obviously pertaining to hunger. We have obviously a big increase in food reward sensitivity, delayed satiation, et cetera, list goes on. But essentially when energy availability is low, so energy intake is low, and global energy availability in terms of fat mass is considerably below your settling range, your hunger will increase dramatically. Obviously, the goal in a contest preparation is to manage this. And how do we do that? Well, we manage it partly through our nutrition periodization protocol. So that's definitely a component that we could talk about in a separate piece, but we can manage it through that side of things in part. Then we can also manage it through exploiting volume-based foods. And you should be doing this by default. Obviously, as caloric intake comes down, there's less total opportunity for us to accumulate our micronutrient intake. So we need to really prioritize fruit, vegetables, and other minimally processed food selections. And that means by default, we should be accumulating as much volume in our diet as possible. And you get pretty savvy in terms of ways to exploit volume in your diet. Now, that will help manage hunger. You'll get a bit of, you'll stimulate the stretch receptors in the stomach, but it really doesn't change the long-term orexigenic hormones, so you're still going to be hungry. Meal timing and frequency is another component you can manage. There seems to be a sweet spot when it comes to that side of things in terms of managing hunger, where if the meals are too frequent and too small, you never really stimulate a satiation response, and conversely, if the meals are too infrequent, you get very hungry in between, and there may be some suboptimalities with pulsatile protein dosing as well. And then obviously there's a couple other bits and pieces. We consume fluids. In more than likely, you'll find you'll be consuming a lot of fluids in contest preparation to help attenuate hunger. And obviously pacing yourself eating is another really important component. You have delayed satiation in a dieting condition, and you're also very hungry. So it's very easy to eat very fast. So one of the things that I do, which I don't have here, usually I always have a set of chopsticks. And I'm known for this because I eat with chopsticks in contest preparation exclusively.
Everything.
So I actually change my cutlery. I go from like soup spoon to dessert spoon. And then I go from forks to cake forks to chopsticks to slow things down. So there's a couple of key sort of practical pieces that you could potentially employ to help with management.
Yeah, I mean, you made some great points there. Actually, just summarizing pretty much everything what you could potentially do. I think it's just important for people to understand that you don't want to pull every strategy just at the beginning of prep, but rather just gradually increasing those things or decreasing, whatever.
100%.
Yeah.
So on a similar vein, I am certainly in support, let's say, of consuming some diet-related beverages. I think that dieting these days is a whole lot easier than it would have been 40 years ago. I mean, we have...
Absolutely.
Especially when you go to the US. I mean, the US are the absolute gods of diet-related food. I honestly think that. But, let's say diet soda, for example. I love diet soda. I have no issue with consuming it in contest preparation. But it's one of those things where we keep that tool in our tool bag for later. I usually say to my guys, okay, cool. Maximum 3 cans of Coke Zero. The start of contest prep, if you don't need it, don't have it. when hunger increases, maybe let's introduce 1, later introduce 2, later introduce 3. Exactly as you mentioned, you don't want to use all your tools from day 1, because it only gets worse from there then. So you kind of want to keep the tools in the tool bag, use them when you need to. And that goes for the whole entire contest preparation. I look at it like a game of chess. You're always thinking 4 moves ahead. And the same with contest preparation. You always got to think multiple moves ahead. What I'm doing now influences what I'm doing in 5 weeks' time and in 10 weeks' time. So yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. So you also touched on how even if you maximize, like for example, food volume and get your stomach stretched out, that you still don't really, you're still hungry. You may attenuate it a little bit, but I think just accepting hunger and seeing it as part of the process, probably something, just embrace it at some point. Helped me a ton. And being busy is also a big point. I was so busy at the end, I was not very worried about my dieting. I was more worried about how to coach my, 30 plus clients that I had at the time. So, and actually training got me pretty training got me pretty heavy anxiety at the end, at least my lower sessions. So I'm probably as a first timer probably had a good thing going with my food, because I was just eating, and when I was done, it was just done. I wasn't worried about it at all, or not at all, but probably not to a point where you would expect a first timer. But I think just being busy and having things to do, especially after a meal, helps with you not thinking about how you could potentially eat more or whatever.
Definitely.
So yeah.
I think that makes a massive difference. Another really interesting point, which I thought I'd bring to the table, is when we look in a more clinical setting with anorexic patients, for example, anorexics tend to demonstrate a decrease in receptor sensitivity to some of the erexogenic hormones, so the hormones that stimulate a hunger response. And obviously in the context of a severe eating disorder like anorexia, that is a very bad thing. But conversely, as a bodybuilder, one could possibly argue that it might be a productive piece. And I would see it quite likely that after 7 months of dieting and getting to such low body fat percentiles, that it's quite likely that a bodybuilder would exhibit rather similar decreases in receptor sensitivity. I know that for me personally, by the end of the contest preparation, I'm so mentally blocked off to hunger that I literally in my head, I'm thinking hunger is a state of mind. I know my body's hungry, but I can choose whether I accept that or I just go, whether I think about it, or I just go, you know what, that's fine. And I think this is another thing which the novice athletes tend to struggle with a bit as well, is, look, it doesn't matter who you are. Even if you're like me and you're not food obsessed, I really don't care about food, I just eat it when I need to. You will be more food obsessed after a contest preparation. But one of the best things that you can do is to minimize your visual exposure to food. So in our house, it's probably pretty simple because we only have the food we need. But I'm thinking more on social media. The amount of guys that they first compete, you open up their search bar on Instagram, and it's all food. And if you're looking at food all day, you're making it worse. You're constantly exposing yourself to this. Whereas for me, motorsports and bodybuilding are my favorite things. So I fill up my feed with bodybuilding and cars and motorcycles because it takes my headspace away from the food. So I think that that's another thing that some of the novice guys, they think they're making it better. I'm watching the food channel, I'm like, you can do that if you want to, but I think you're making your life a bit harder.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been there, but it's ages ago. It was probably my second year of training or whatever, when I actually dieted too long. I've been there, but I think also those diets that I did before in my athletic career, if you want to say, helped me with contest prep, because I was just really aware that those things are making it worse. Yeah. So another interesting point that you made was eating for performance or energy rather than for pleasure and contest prep. And I mean, at some point the thing that you have to fight is the lethargy, or the energy that you don't have, and you really want to conserve that energy for the real important tasks, like training or your job, or basically those two things at the end. So I think at a certain experience in bodybuilding, you mainly eat for energy and for your performance.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, look,
basically.
Yeah. Look, I think that the challenging thing with dieting is this. Everything in theory is quite simplistic. Well, not necessarily. It depends how much you peel back the layers in terms of, the science. But from an external viewpoint, things are quite simplistic. But our relationship with food is very in-depth and very sort of interpersonal. You know, it's food is an element that brings people together socially. There's a big cultural aspect. We just had Christmas and New Year's. What's that about? Historically, it's a time of eating a lot of food and bringing people together. So the challenging thing is, yes, for a time to approach your nutrition with that thought process that, okay, I'm just going to eat for function. In the context of contest preparation, I think it's a good thing to think like that for that time.
Yeah.
But keep in mind this. Bodybuilding is not supposed to be sustainable. It's only for any greater length of time in the contest prep. It's only sustainable for that time. What is it? 6, 7 months, 10 months? It's a short time. For that time, you embrace whatever mentality you require to do what you need to do. And I think that in that time, I'm thinking that exactly like that. Just need to eat for function. Bang, 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 like a robot. But yes, in the off season, you I suppose you somewhat keep that mentality, but you also have the social and maybe the enjoyment side of things that maybe you can participate in a little bit more. Definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of applies to the other side as well. If you actually, for example, you do like a couple of years of off season, and at a certain point you're just not hungry at all, and you can't really see food, then at that point you also have to kind of see it as just a function thing. Like right now, I don't want to eat, I just still do it.
Yes, well, we've all been there, and it's a really opposite end of the pendulum. You know, you're in the middle of an off season in 2021, and you're thinking back to 2019, like, man, I used to dream about food, and now I don't want to know food. Contrast, right? There's not a whole lot of balance in a bodybuilder's lifestyle in that regard, but it's all part of the fun.
There's a sweet spot in between, but that sweet spot usually just don't stay there too long.
You're not living there for long. Yeah.
Cool. Anything to add on to that question?
Not specifically, but yeah.
Cool. Then final question, and actually a question I'm really interested in, is how do you, because I have read it on some of your posts, that you prep with an athlete. I think it wasn't in 2019. I'm not sure. But you actually wrote about that, and my question would be how do your coaching style differs when in off season compared to being in prep yourself?
Look, it does. Okay, so each time I compete, I always compete with a cohort of athletes. Not usually in the same category. It has happened occasionally, but generally not. But let's say 2019, we had, I believe, 15 athletes that were getting on stage between Australia, New Zealand, and the US. And obviously for the guys that were in Australia, when we traveled to the big shows, we traveled as a conglomerate. So it was a really unique experience because as we're going through this process, obviously I have a next level amount of relatability, having been living that process at the same time. Now, the biggest thing that I always focus on is this. Number one is my choice to prepare for a show is my personal choice, and I do not want my athletes to have a decrease in the service that I provide. So I'm big on switching on and switching off. So when I need to be Brandon, the bodybuilder, when I'm training, then I'm that. And when I need to be BK, the coach to my athletes, then I switch off to that. So I always want my coaching stand to be there. But in terms of mannerisms, I think it's quite possible that my coaching style differs a little bit. And I think that coaching is definitely an art. You've got to know when to push, when to pull. Got to know when to show empathy. You got to know when to pull the emotion out of it and say, this is how it is. If you want this, this is what you do. It's a balance. And I think that in contest preparation, I'm probably a little bit more to the point in that, okay, if someone's not doing what they need to, I'm probably more inclined to say, look, you need to pull your finger out of your ass and you got to do this. I'm probably a little bit more inclined to sort of do that, just because obviously, I'm there with them. But I always want to make sure the coaching quality is there. And honestly, I really enjoy it. I think that, and I do think my athletes really also enjoy it when, they know that, hey, coach is doing this too. He's got my back always, and he's living this process also. So yeah.
Super interesting. I mean, do you think for what I have been in 2019, at some point you just get really your emotions dropping, and it's not like you don't have any emotions at all, but you probably from the outside are maybe a little bit less exciting and less emotional. And I was a machine. I was just rational to the point, and like in hindsight probably have show a little bit more empathy, but that's something I'm working on in approximately 2023.
All right. Yeah, it is always an interesting thing, and I think that a big point that I always highlight, both with myself but also to my athletes, is that competing is your choice. It's important to you. It's not important to a lot of other people around you, and I think that you get better at managing the dieting, the contest preparation itself. And sometimes I see like first time competitors, they just look emotionally mute, have a resting bitch face on all the time. And I'm like, hey, cheer up! Like, we're doing this for fun, man. You gotta get into this. And I always say this: just because you're in contest preparation doesn't give you permission to be an a-hole. Like,
makes sense.
It doesn't cost anything to be nice. So, definitely as a coach, I think it's more emotionally taxing. Life is just more emotionally taxing. For my athletes, I'm always there, and I give them everything. I think it's more the people around you that see you outside of that feel it more. Like my fiance, for example, she's like, you finish work and you're just like, done. I talk all day and then I finish work and I'm just like, man, I'm sorry, honey, I got nothing left. Like,
yeah, makes sense.
So it's those sort of people that feel it.
I mean, I was probably talking a little bit slower in like my check-in replies and stuff like that, and I remember my mom was just so worried about me. She was like, "What are you doing?"
Yes.
Yeah, good point. I mean, ultimately, you want to be there, and if do you have a limit on yourself in terms of athletes you want to take on in a season when you prep yourself or when you prep for yourself rather than being in off season?
100%. We do a couple of things within the business. We cap our total coaching load, and obviously we do that because my biggest mission is to have the highest quality service and the highest and the best result per person. And obviously it's a time-consuming piece to coach. So we cap our coaching load as a total. We also cap our coaching load per season. And there is, in contest prep, when I'm prepping, in recent years, I've been able to manage pretty similar. But in future, I will definitely cap it at, a certain volume for that particular season, because it is pretty challenging to manage, to function at such a high level, because there is a lot of thought. I mean, at least there should be a lot of thought that goes into working with your athletes. I mean, to me, I look at it like it's a massive responsibility. They're putting their result in my hands. So I'll definitely cap the load for my contest preparations also.
What would that client load cap be, if I can ask?
Look, per season, I will keep it at around 15. For me, here's the thing. I have fellow friends that do, so that's per season. So we have majority of our athletes are in the off season usually. We have obviously a section of the cohort which will be in competition. I have fellow coaches that work with much bigger client loads per season. They generally work a lot more in bikini and fitness, for example. And within those sort of realms, I think it's quite possible you can work with more client load. For me, like I said, I really like working with bodybuilding and figure in particular, and men's physique for that matter. And I think within those realms, it's definitely a more time-consuming process, particularly at the end when you're looking at, peaking an athlete.
Yeah.
Bikini, we're going to call it a peak week and not really do much. For the bodybuilders, we're looking at your physique every day in that final stretch coming in a show. And if you have 15 athletes, that last bit coming in a show, your workload is 4 times as much. Like, you need to cater for that time in particular. So 15 is, for the actual season itself, is a decent round.
You're talking about we all the time. Do you have co-coaches or?
I do say we a lot. I used to have another coach that I work with. At this point, I don't have her in the business, but I say we a lot because myself and my partner, she works external to the industry primarily. She's an academic / researcher for a university here in Queensland, but she gets very involved within BK conditioning at comp time. She is an absolute absolute asset. So she does a lot of our tanning for the local guys, makeup, and she does a lot of the scheduling when it comes to comp time for me. So we is myself and my fiance Rachel.
Pretty cool. I mean, it's super important to have someone on your side when you prep at the end, like
Absolutely.
on the show day, like other than your coach.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. How can I ask how many clients you have in total, or your general like workload, whatsoever?
I probably cap my coaching load a little bit lower than a good portion of other coaches. And like I said, the big piece for me is, coaching for me started as an absolute passion. I love bodybuilding. I love nutrition and exercise science. It's my biggest passion, and I see it being a passion for the remainder of my life. And within that, when it comes to coaching, the most important thing to me is that it doesn't matter if I have 5 people or 15 people getting on stage. I want every single one of those guys to look their very best. Someone can say to me like, "Oh my God, I saw your whole team and every single person looked absolutely amazing. My job is complete." So I'm very cognizant of, I suppose, knowing where my limits are in terms of, okay, if I go above this threshold, my service is going to decline, and I'm just not willing to compromise on that. And that's why I do cap my coaching load. And it frustrates me in a way because there are so many athletes that come to me and want to work, and if I don't have the availability, they go on my wait list for however long until we have an availability. But again, to me, it's just so important. You've got to have, stay true to your roots. And my biggest piece is making sure that I can give these athletes what they need.
I mean, obviously, having a cap is crucial, and at a certain point, quality will suffer.
Either quality suffers or your quality of life suffers. And once your quality of life suffers as a coach, your coaching quality will decline eventually.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best things that was put to me by a mentor of mine was make sure your cup is full first, because if you're not looking after yourself, you're no use to your athletes. And I've personally been very close to burnout. 2016, I was very close to burnout. I just nearly got to that point where this is too much. But I learned from that. Or I like to think so. And I went, okay, cool. That's where the ceiling is. So, yeah, got to look after yourself. Bit of self-care along the way goes a long way in terms of being the best coach you can for your athletes.
Do you see that cap going up in the next few years due to maybe being more efficient?
I think that cap has increased in the past few years as a product of getting more efficient. But with that said, there is certainly a limit to how efficient you can be. It's like sleep volume, right? You can get better sleep quality, but eventually you tap out your quality and you just need more volume. And I think it's the same with your coaching athletes. And so I think right now I'm probably close to my ceiling, or at least with what I'm doing at the moment. So I do study part-time, and my education is a big priority for myself. So with where I'm at now, it's basically at the ceiling. perhaps once I finish this next degree, I'll have a bit more time. But I think by around that time, it's also likely time to have a family. So that's going to change some things as well. So I don't think it'll really go up. I don't think.
Cool, man. Thanks. That's pretty much it. That was the last question. And for now, I just want you to tell the people where they can find your servers, your Instagram, or your social media presence in general. Maybe some
Super.
products, whatsoever.
Well, look, as a start, thank you so much once again for having me on. I do appreciate it. Like I said, I love sharing, sharing some perspective and hopefully some practical takeaways for the sport that I absolutely adore. You can find me on Instagram. I will say I'm probably not the social media wizard that some of my fellow athletes and coaches are, but you can find me at Brandon Kempter. That's just my full name on Instagram. My business is BK Conditioning. There's some links on Instagram, so you can check out the website and see what we're about. Have a scroll around. You can also find me on Facebook, but I don't have a business page on there. But you can add me personally. Feel free to drop me a message, and I'll be sure to respond.
Cool, man. I will link everything in the description. And definitely check out Brandon's Instagram. You don't post it often, but if you post, it's every time it's gold. So I read all of those posts. So thanks for coming on again, and I wish you a fantastic day.
Thank you, my friend.